Welcome back. It's now day 27 of the Virgin Mary and the Kingdom of the Divine Will. And today we find Mary on the verge of allowing Jesus to enter into his passion and death. Now, this is a moment of great sorrow for her, but it's a moment of this love affair that we've been talking about all along, that is the divine will. It's a love affair that began in the Trinity with the love the Son had for the Father, and the Father had for all of us, his children. The love that would not allow us, even though we tore away from him and his divine will, that he would not let us just go into that dark night, that he would send his Son, right? And then, as we know, Jesus found that it was equality with God was not something to be grasped at. But in his obedience to the Father's love, he was willing to lower himself and become even a slave, even unto death on a cross. So this love affair is now turning deadly. But we've been watching as through the various writings of Luisa, such as her romances, the excesses of love in the Christmas novena, where we found what Jesus was doing for those 9 months in the womb. And what he was doing was loving you and I, where he was taking our lives, even there in the darkness of his mother's womb, and all the sins that we had, that he was going around the world, seeking you and I out, and redoing our lives in his divinity, in the divine will, and doing them as they should have been done. And how, when he was born, in those 30 years that he spent in the hidden life with Joseph and Mary, not only was he continuing to do these acts, these divine acts of redoing our lives and making them as they should be, waiting for us to activate those divine acts and return the love to the Father that was denied. Not only was he doing this, but Mary, his mother, was doing them as well, all through this. For wherever we find Jesus, we find Mary, because she was so full of divine will, grace, that she did what Jesus did, felt what Jesus felt, saw what Jesus saw, right? And whatever happened to Jesus was happening in her as well. This is the nature of love, which we are now just discovering. And now just getting an inkling of this call for us, that Jesus wants us to become love, right? And the Mary, who has all these graces, wants to help us move into this place of divine love in the divine will. And we see how Jesus, when he did his ministry through the rounds of redemption, we follow him and echo what he did with him. As now we have this gift of the divine will, we are able to do these things when we fuse our human will with him. Like Mary now, we can also repeat these acts and activate them in the souls for all, so that God receives the full requital of love that was always his. And now, on this day 27, we have a very special day. For in this one day, Mary does rounds of the hours of her passion. For as she's following Jesus in his passion, it becomes hers as well. Now we remember, if we have read the rounds of the hours of the passion, how each word that we say and follow as we read them, Jesus promises to give us a soul. And as we see now and follow Mary through these times, she not only read, but she lived those hours. And she was in fullness of the divine will. So how much redemption work, how much of those activated souls did she get out of purgatory? We'll never know. But she's calling us to join her and Jesus, and now Luisa, to follow this love affair and to repeat our acts with theirs. And so let's just hop in now and see what Mary has to say as she is now going through these terribly, incredibly painful moments with her son. And she holds no bars. She talks about how great the bitterness was. For the Lord, divinity had already decreed that this was the last day for her son. Right? The apostle Judas had already betrayed Jesus. He had already had the last excessive love of forming the Eucharist so that he could remain here on earth and give us himself, body, blood, soul, and divinity in the Eucharist till the last day. And now the Father is about to take his son back home. And Mary is requested a request that is more painful than any mother could bear. So she says, "Oh, dear child, the divine fiat gave him to me," Jesus, right? "And I in the divine fiat received him. Now that same fiat, I make the consignment of him." So in other words, her first fiat was, "Let it be done to me according to thy word," so that she resigned her human will never to pick it up again, to always cooperate only with the divine will. And now the divine will is asking her for a fiat to let go of Jesus and let him do his mission. Let him die for you and me. So is this a fiat of death? No, it's a fiat of love. It's the same love that the Trinity sent Jesus on this mission. It's the same fiat of love that Mary allowed herself to be part of this mission for you and I. All right. This was her gift to the world of her son. All right. One which was heart-rendering, heartbreaking, because all the heart of Jesus, Father, were broken over our sin, our breaking away from the divine will. And now Mary, seeing us broken and desperate in the darkness of the human will and all the miseries, she's our mother, as she's Jesus's mother. And so she reaches into her heart, breaking as it is, to try to help us, right? And she says it, that in the pains of this decision, she says that the pains of my beloved son, therein was your soul, your human will, which did not let itself be dominated by that of God. So we were the fly, the thorn in Jesus's heart, right? Bleeding him because of our willfulness in our human will, which now Mary is offering herself and Jesus so that she could and he could cover our rebellion with their pains, their sacrifice. And she says, we embalmed it, right? Our soul. We fructified it with our suffering so that it would be disposed to receive the life of the divine will. You see, in our human will, we were dead. And she had to not only embalm it, but bring it back to life and then give it fructifying life, make it fruitful so it could also bear life, right? So we're not only being called to live again, but to be life-giving as well in the divine will, which is what she is doing in this very act. It is what Luisa is doing in the divine will. And what you and I are being called to, not only to just come alive again, but to bring life to the whole world and restore it. So the pain of this, if it had not been for the divine will, Mary says, she would have died herself. And she, on the verge of death, the divine will would revive her, right? Because it was what animated her as she let go of her human will. The pains that she felt was still so severe. But her yes, her fiat, which was voluntary and willing and never forced, would hold back nothing from God, nothing from the divine will. And Jesus knew this. He loved her. They were one. And so he comes to her and he begs her now, in this most tearful of all moments, he says, Mama, goodbye. Bless your son and give me the obedience to die. My and your divine will made me be conceived. My and your divine will must now let me die. Quickly, oh my dear mother, pronounce your fiat and say to me, I bless you and I give you the obedience to die crucified. For what the eternal volition wants, I also want. Right? And this was Jesus, wasn't it? Not my will, but thine be done, even unto death, death on the cross. Now, for all of us, just as this divine will led Jesus to this great fiat of sacrifice, it will also lead him to the resurrection on Easter, right? So it's that pathway, the paschal mystery of death to life, one which not only are we following, but as we follow it in the divine will, we can restore all of the world. All right, and in the Revelations, that great scene where Jesus sees the Blessed Mother on the Via Dolorosa and says, look, Mother, I make all things new. Bloodied, stripped down, unrecognizable. And this is what we are also called, that as we say our fiats, as we do our rounds, not with our lips, but with all of our heart, one with Jesus as he's doing it, we too can say, look, Mama, we make all things new. So the abandonment of the apostles was the most painful thing for Jesus, right? And so as he tore himself away from Mary, she could not tear herself away from him. Her gaze followed him as far as her gaze could go, but after that, she followed him in her soul, for their souls were one. Wherever he went, she went with him. Whatever he felt, she felt. And so when the apostles fell asleep in the garden, she felt the abandonment. When they were betrayed him, she felt the betrayal. And she walked with him through all the pains of that night and was inseparable. For true love cannot be separated. And those pains in her were reflected in her heart, and they were liquefied by sorrow and love. So much so that she felt them more than if they had been her own pains. Now for Jesus, we know that, as she tells Luisa in the hours of the Passion, that this being with him, as she was being with him, offers him relief and comfort. All right, and he desires not to be alone. And so Mary, being the first to show us the way, did not leave him alone, even though that as she met him with the other pious women and wanted to bathe his face and take care of him, they would not let him. They would not permit even that little solace so that he would be alone in the alone. However, in her heart, she was able to feel him, be with him, feel the insults, hear the insults that were heaped upon Jesus by the soldiers, the slaps and the blows that they gave him, the scourging, all right, and all the crowds shouting, crucify him, crucify him. I saw him take up the cross, she says, on his shoulders, breathless, exhausted, and I was not able to bear it. I hastened my steps to give him my last kiss and to wipe his face all bathed in blood, but nothing of the kind, For us there was no pity, and the cruel soldiers pulled him away with ropes and made him fall. And so she experienced the passion full on as well, as the sorrows that were foretold to her did. And these pains and sorrows, she tells us, are grist for the mill for the divine will. These are the raw material that when we say our fiat with her in the beginning to the end, convert these pains into grace, into divine goodness, and into love back to the Father. And that is what divine justice requires in the universe right now, as we see division everywhere. This is what love looks like. Now, today, as we record this, it is Epiphany. In the middle of an Comic-Con plague, right? We are hearing about the Epiphany, where Jesus is revealed as King of Kings. And yet, as we read this, we see him being revealed at every step as the King of love, right? The great love that is mercy, kindness, goodness without end. And as we see him being nailed to the cross and giving his very last breath, his all, it is God himself crawling out, behold love. Behold love. And all of creation beholding the cost of love, she says, begins crying. Graves open, right? The dead rise. Temple veil is ripped, and all of the earth is in grief over what love has done. And yet, love does not count the cost. Love never stops. When we think of our loves in our life, then we need to recall what love really is, so that we can give God love for love through our spouses, through our family, through those we have in our world, even our people at work, neighbors, you name it. All right, these are for us to be Jesus, all right, to live in the divine will with them, for them, to return their love back to the Father. That's our call. And so Mary ends by saying, once again, to look and see the cost of our human will, the evil that it costs, the pain that it costs God, who is love, who is completely and utterly defenseless against our cruelty, our rejection, our neglectful disregard for him, our rebellion, all right? That what he does in response to that is to give more, to love more, even unto the cross. And so she begs us to not do our human will, right? But to have compassion on this most loving of God, right? This most loving Father that we have, this most loving Jesus who followed and told us to pick up our cross and follow him, right? And we follow him to Calvary, but we follow him to love. And if we follow him to love, we will follow him to life. And not just our life, but the life of the whole world. He's waiting for you. He's waiting for me to say our yes, our fiat. All of creation is waiting and groaning, waiting for us to take up our place as sons of God and to restore the face of the earth the way God designed it in the beginning. So I hope that you, with the Blessed Mother, who's held firm to the end and now is begging us, please say yes. All right? That we do. With Luisa, we say our fiat, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Until next week, God bless you.